Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, and welcome to another webinar here from your friends at USMLE-Rx and Rx Coach. Tonight's session is going to be one of our secrets of the USMLE sessions on tips for IMGs. And to lead you through this helpful set of slides and advice and guidance, it's going to be our own Dr. Richard Blumengold. Richard, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, good evening, everyone. Like Jeff said, my name is Dr. Richard Blumengold. I am a third-year internal medicine resident now and a proud graduate of the University of Medicine and Health Sciences in the Caribbean West Indies. So my goal tonight is to give you, from my perspective, as someone that has gone through the residency match, gone through the testing, kind of some tips for you as you're going along your journey to may help you get the best residency and the residency that you truly want.
Excellent.
So the first thing that,
I was just going to say, before we get started, I wanted to say we often will start our sessions by asking students, are you an M1, an M2, or are you an IMG? I think we can assume that many of the people here joining us tonight are IMGs or FMGs. So what we would like you to do is go to the question box and let us know where you are attending school, what school you attend, as well as the city or country or island. Go down and let us know. That gives us a little bit of information about who you are and what you're looking for. I do want to note that Sean Nanji is going to be helping to answer some of the questions tonight. So feel free to hit us up in the question box, and we are going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can tonight. Okay, back to you, Richard.
Thanks, Jeff. So on the screen right now, we're going to it's a summarization of kind of some of the stuff we're going to really get into tonight. Formulating a study schedule, how we'll stay organized, approaches to questions, some small tips on dissecting questions, and then we'll get into what are some of the expectations for you guys as IMGs on both USMLE Step 1 and Step 2, as well as some tips for how to make yourself the strongest candidate in the residency match, and what you can do on your clinical rotations to get the very best letter of recommendation that you can to bolster your application going into the ERES. In addition, we'll have some housekeeping things from Jeff and the rest of the team at the end. But for now, let's get started with our first topic. So formulating a study schedule for IMGs. So as we're going through our schooling, every school is different, whether your school has essay style tests or multiple choice tests. Everyone has gone through the same type of material. So what do we have to do as IMGs? If you go to the next slide, Jeff. For the most part, the number one goal is to establish a study schedule and stick with it. Consistency is the above all for these types of tests. It's not about doing 14 hours a day. It's not about how many topics I can cover a day. If you do the right amount each and every day and stay consistent with it, that's the way you're going to see success. You don't want to tire yourself out. And as an IMG, we usually get material that's presented a little differently than our US counterparts. And for the most part, most programs are accelerated, where we have less time to get presented the same information that our US counterparts do. So we have to really manage our time to be able to get through all of the topics and to be able to make sure that we're covering everything that we need to. So obviously doing our questions, reviewing our coursework, but alternative study methods are using videos, Anki cards, things of that nature, the USMLE bricks, for example, things of that nature that are going to be allowing you to review things in a time-sensitive manner. When we go to the next slide. Save things that are crammable for the very end. I work with students all the time, and I make sure that I tell them, please, things like biostats, things that are biochemistry, genetics, things that you can kind of cram and memorize, save those towards the end. The high yield materials that you'll need to see success on these tests are going to be pathology, pharmacology, and physiology. By having a solid basis and background in these topics, it is going to pay huge dividends if you know why things work the way they work and how they interact with each other. It's going to do a lot better for you than just memorizing the steps of glucose synthesis, for example. And above all, when you're preparing for a step, preparing is mentally taxing. The whole process of medical education in general is extremely, extremely taxing. You have to find ways to stay relaxed and grounded. And this can be in the form of hobbies, yoga, athletics, the gym, or just going to take your dog or pet for a walk or go somewhere. Just allow you to bring yourself down with some peace and avoid burning out from USMLE fatigue, as I like to call it. Whenever we're ready, we have your day should be consisting of roughly 60 to 120 questions as you get very close to your exam. If you're 8 months out from your exam, maybe that's too much. So try to program it such that you're able to review a good amount of questions a day, see a nice amount of topics interspersed with your reading. And you should always review your questions in a timely manner after you finish them. Write down topics. Don't just do questions and say, okay, I got that right, and then never think about it again. I got this question right, but you know what? I really don't remember all the steps that well or why this is the way it is. Let me make a note and go back. Actively studying and actively remembering these topics is what's going to keep them fresh for longer. So that's kind of how we would organize a study schedule, or how we would keep ourselves organized going into the test. Moving on, we have coming up on our next slide, approaches to questions. Now, we're not going to go through a full battery of step-by-step here. We're just going to give you some quick hitters here. On the next slide, we'll talk about some things. Like we said, consistent, organized approaches, not only just with studying, but how we approach the clinical vignettes is how we'll maximize our score. For me, when I was in my school, we were taking block exams periodically every month or so that were between 100 to 150 questions. So the use of multiple choice questions is not something that I inherently was foreign to, but some graduates go to schools where the tests are written. The USMLE-1 is 280 questions, with step 2 being 320. So this is far longer than your periodic block exams, and you will see a difference as you go through them. For those of you that have taken the step 1 already, or may have taken the step 2 and are getting ready for your residency applications, you know how grueling these exams can be at times. So just quick dissection tips, just some things for you guys to keep in mind as you're looking at questions, maybe some things that you wouldn't have thought about, or maybe your professors in school really didn't give you the exposure to. If we're looking at context clues in questions, it'll allow us to have a better idea. When we select answers, for example, utilize all information provided, meaning don't just try and pigeonhole a diagnosis that, oh, I see that this checks this box and this box, this must be the right answer because I don't really know any of these others. Use all information. For example, a demographic can be a huge clue in your answer choice. A 40-year-old Caucasian Caucasian female may have a very different diagnosis, or differential diagnosis may vary between a 7-year-old African-American male. Things like timing, much like when you're on your clinical rotations, or if you're doing these questions and that's your only exposure, did the presentation happen just before they came to the hospital, or did it happen several hours ago, or has it been going on for 2 weeks? And another big tip I always make sure people keep an eye on, make sure when they give those lists of medications that the patient's taking this, and this, keep an eye out for those drug-drug interactions, our CYP450 inhibitors, 2 drugs with the same mechanism, etc. These are just key things for you guys to kind of keep in mind. So beyond that, the questions that you guys will encounter and the vignettes that you guys will encounter will have things like outliers. Okay, if they say patient has immigrated from this country, it may indicate a lack of vaccination or exposure to different organisms that maybe the United States patients may not have been exposed to. Okay, obviously paying attention to things like setting, where the patient is, ED versus office. If I'm having a heart attack, I'm not going to see my primary care, I'm going to the emergency room. So you kind of have an idea in your mind of, okay, this is acute management. I have to go through my acute management checklist. And contraindications and risk factors are becoming a lot more prevalent in questions. Things, for example, like I listed here, you may have a diabetic that comes in and they have severe chronic kidney disease on top of this. Metformin may not be your drug of choice to give this patient because of the increased risk of acidosis. These types of questions are really starting to move to the forefront for these exams, and especially our step 2 listeners that are preparing. These are very common questions that they tuck in those contraindications within the question. One of the next things that we'll talk about as we're moving on is going to be our expectations. And this is what I feel like most of the audience here is here for. What is expected of you as an international medical graduate for step 1 and step 2? As IMGs, you have to be very, very prepared for your times as wards when you get to your clinical rotations, as well as your clinical basics to make you stand out to both your residents and your attendings. Even though step 1 has now moved to the pass-fail format, for USMLE step 1 at least, you should still try to gain as much proficiency with the material as humanly possible, and try to learn all these organ systems as a functional unit. Because while it may only be a pass-fail test for step 1, that means that the weight is placed much, much heavier on step 2 for consideration for residency programs. I myself sat in interviews for potential candidates for our residency this past year, and a lot of weight was placed upon step 2 because that was really the only distinguishing factor. Everyone that was applying was coming through the pass-fail USMLE-1. So it can make a huge difference in terms of separating yourself from the field. Moving on from this, other expectations you'll have to deal with, unfortunately. Since this change, everyone's leaning, like I said, on step 2. My biggest thing is aim to score high, don't aim for a score. Because if you place too much emphasis on, I need a 260, I need a 260, it's going to cause you to become frustrated as you go through these practice exams, particularly early on when you guys are preparing, where you may not be reaching that goal yet. And if you're not getting there, you may feel as though you're failing or you're not getting to where you need to be. The idea should always be with every test, take what the test is giving you, and especially these practice exams, let the practice exams dictate where you are in your study. Where are my weaknesses? Where can I improve? As opposed to, I need to get a 250 on this practice test, otherwise I'm never going to get a residency. Okay, that little shift in mindset can help a lot. And moving on from this, one of the unfortunate things that we deal with as IMGs is a bit of scrutiny from our schools, whether you come from a foreign school in a different country, where you're by way of the Caribbean like I am. On the next slide, we are going to begin to talk about I believe, the hard truth that I have to break to you guys, okay? And it's being honest as someone has gone through the process. Unfortunately, despite the fact that we all learn the same material and are taking the same exams, you guys as IMGs will have to do everything in your power to outperform your US counterparts. This is an unfortunate truth, but step 1 is now pass-fail. Step 2 matters more. If a US student requires a 230 to be considered for a program, that program may be looking at an IMG and saying, I need to see a 235 or 240 for him to be considered, him or her to be considered. Now, how can you level the playing field? By adding things to your applications like research, like publications, like great letters of recommendation, okay? Use your time when you're in your elective rotations and try to rotate at hospitals you may want to potentially work at. I'll tell you right now, we had medical students that rotated with our program that also applied to our program for residency. And a familiar face really does help you stand out when those files come across the desk of our resident counsel and our program director, and we see a name that we have had in our hospital that we've all worked with. We give that a consideration. We open that file, we sit down and we look at the qualifications because we know this person. Now, that's not a uniform statement, but it cannot help you, it cannot hurt you for that matter, to be a familiar face in a crowd when applying for residency, okay? The stacks of papers that line up on those desks are a mile high, okay? You guys need to do something to make yourselves stand out. Now, a little bit on how to do that will be for the next slide. Like I said, you can get your research, publications, LORs, but what can you do to really get those LORs? So take it from me, who is, like I said, a third-year resident. I have interns and I have medical students part of my teams every single day. The Step 2 score is great, but being an asset to your clinical rotation team is far more important. If you get into a program, and particularly you're in a subspecialty that you want to be in, that should be your number one priority. I should be able to physically see as the resident. If you tell me, and I ask every student that comes and works with me, what are you looking to apply to? Some say internal medicine, some say general surgery. Well, when you end up in the rotation that you may want to apply to, it's time for you to be the one working the hardest. Get there early and leave late. Don't be the first one out the door. The biggest red flag for senior residents if the medical students are looking to run out the door, because I know they don't want it that bad, okay? Constantly read up on your cases. Whatever you're getting, whether it's an OB case, a pediatric case, whatever you're getting, make sure that you know as much as the resident. Now, that may be a stretch to say to know as much as a resident, particularly for our M3s, but you should be able to, at the end of your day, go home and review these topics such that when they're going in for differentials, when they're thinking about things, what lab tests to order, what to consider in this patient, what we would expect to see, you can participate. Another thing, don't be wallflowers when it comes to differential diagnoses when you're with your residents. Nobody likes to have students, and nobody wants to see a student that doesn't want to talk or doesn't want to deal or doesn't want to put their ideas forth, okay? Spend time with your patients, gather good histories, and try to formulate your own diagnoses before you get to your residents. Let them see that you're working hard to try and get your own answer instead of waiting for them. And finally, for this slide at least, prepare for every shelf like you're preparing for Step 2. The more you prepare for the individual cores over the course of your third and into your fourth year, the easier it will be to prepare for the real exam. Now, Jeff, I'll take a moment here. I think there were some questions pouring in with the question box. Do we want to give anyone the opportunity to ask?
I do. I want to point out we did ask a question in the chat box that I would love more of you to go to the question box and let us know, what is your biggest concern or your biggest fear as an IMG? Go ahead and let us know, and we will we'll send those along. So, Sean, let me ask you if you've got a couple of questions that you might want to serve up to Richard.
Yeah, actually, I just sent him one. Had a good question here. We have an international medical graduate from a South American country, and they want to know if they want to apply for internal medicine residency, how important it is to have some research work in order to apply.
Well, I think it's important as an IMG in general, and as a residency applicant, to have some form of research or some form of publication that you at least worked on, even if it's in the format of a secondary author or a data reviewer, just to show that you've been a part of academia already. You've been trying to get yourself into evidence-based medicine. It strengthens your application, and also it serves as a talking point, particularly when I had these students coming in that had research, we asked them about the research. What did they find? What was their contribution to the research? What was the biggest takeaway they got from their research? It not only gives you something on the application to make it stronger, but it gives you a talking point in interviews.
Thank you, Rich. I have another question here for you. And that question is, you know, we have some fears here that people are sharing. So one is, you know, if they graduated over 10 years ago, what can they do to boost their resume?
Well, if there's been a 10-year gap from graduation, one of the first things I would ask is, well, what were you doing within the 10 years? Were you working in some other sector of medicine? Were you participating in research? Things you could do to strengthen your application at that point are to maybe see if you can get into an observership or something along those lines. Okay, that would allow you to get back in the hospital fold, get back around the doctors, and, you know, start getting people to know your face, especially if you're looking to work in a particular area. That way it can kind of give you a little bit of a refresher, as well as help you professionally with a place to apply.
And Rich, I got a couple more here for you. We got entering clerkships this August. What is the best way to approach a resident or attending about getting involved with research? And another question here is, how do we find opportunities to do research or land clinical rotations in the United States?
Well, if you're entering your clerkships, when you get on the floors and you're physically around the residents, the best way for you to get a research project is to be direct. Ask the residents. The residents most residencies in the country require you to have research projects in order for you to graduate. The residents will be working on something. If you show enthusiasm and you show that you really want to be a part of it, most residents would be open to having a medical student on board to both make the work a little easier, divvy out or spread out the workload, I guess. As long as you're willing to maybe take a lower level position within the research, maybe it's just data collection or data review or chart organization, whatever that may be, even if it's just a small piece, if you put your foot in the door, when that resident goes to his clinical coordinator, hey, the student also helped, you can maybe see about getting it in there. The attendings, for the most part, are a different story. The attendings typically join up with residents or get themselves onto resident-run studies as supervising attendings for the study. So your best bet is to go for the interns, and your strongest bet is to go for the first-year residents. The first-year residents are the ones that you'll be working with closest when you're doing your clerkships, and you can go with them.
I'm going to pause here and just let everyone know we are going to have a raffle this evening. We're actually going to be giving away a free session of RX Coach to 5 lucky winners. And we're also going to have 2 winners who will receive a subscription to our RX 360 Plus Step 2 CK bundle. Just want you guys to know that. But at this point, what we're going to do is we are going to, we've got a lot of questions that have come in. So I've got, Sean focusing on looking for themes and looking for good questions that will help kind of drive the discussion. So go ahead, hit that question box, let us know, and Sean, I'll help you. I'll let you kind of walk us through some of the main questions you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions, Rich, I keep seeing is, if I fail step before, or if I'm an IMG, can I still get a residency? And so, I know you've addressed this a little bit, but if you don't mind elaborating there, that'd be great.
Okay, let me put everyone at ease. A failed step is not a death sentence for you for getting your residency. It is a hiccup, but it is about how strong the recovery is. I can speak from experience. We have 3 members of our residency that failed their steps and still matched in our program because they failed step 1, they passed the second time, and then they passed step 2 with flying colors. They added research. It's about what you do with that fail. It is not a death sentence by any means. It is just going to be a little bit tougher for you, but as long as you rise to the occasion of that, you absolutely can still get a residency. I won't undersell the difficulty of it. It makes it a little harder, but it is entirely possible. It is just dependent on how hard you work and how hard you try to make the opportunities arise for yourself.
And then does having step 3 done or having an MPH or an MHA help for landing a match?
Yes and no. It depends. So I personally took my step 3 before starting residency, but that was more so I wanted to be able to really focus my intern and beginning of my second year on improving myself diagnostically and getting myself to a place where I was as good a doctor as I could be in that time period, and didn't want to be worried about having to study for step on top of writing notes and everything else. But I'm, not a unique case. People do it, but most of my program takes it in the middle of their middle to end of their first year, early second year. It just depends on how well you work with pressure and how well you work with heavy workloads. If you feel as though you can handle it, then take it. But I didn't get asked once in any of my interviews about my step 3. It was never brought up. It was kind of, oh, you have your step 3 done. And then they moved on to more of the other things that were contained within my application. So it can't hurt you, but inherently it's not going to be a deal breaker if you do or don't have it done.
Another question here is, being an IMG, what are some disadvantages that IMGs may have that they can take actions to correct?
One of the biggest things for me with my school, we didn't have a direct radiology course, for example, or there wasn't a lot of focus placed on radiology. I think as a whole, international medical, like Caribbean schools, foreign schools, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the book work inherently that they want you to be able to get through USMLE step 1 because they want to protect their pass rates or their first time pass rates. But I feel like there's a big gap in clinical application. So as IMGs, maybe we really know the material really well when it comes to knowing the ins and outs of the diseases. We may know them, but I think as a group, sometimes what I see is, even I struggle with it when I first really got onto my rotations, recognizing what clinical signs look like in real life and assimilating them in real time. So if I were to say anything, as you try and fill in those gaps, really work on your ability to translate the patient that's on the question to what that patient would look like in real life. That way you can kind of predict and get ahead of the clinical diagnoses. And by the time you're taking care of your own patients, hopefully in residency, you'll have closed that gap completely.
Thanks, Rich. I think those are pretty much the main ones we're seeing here. Another one we're getting from quite a few people is, do grades during basic sciences matter?
So here's what I'll say about basic sciences. Yes, it is nice to have a graduated with honors or dean's listing or whatever your school may designate during basic sciences. The fact of the matter is because we're foreign medical graduates and we're competing against US graduates, there's no standardization between our programs versus theirs. Every school has a different curriculum, even if the subjects are the same, how they organize them. So we don't pay too much attention and not much emphasis is placed upon basic sciences grades. It's important to do well during your basic sciences because you want a good letter from your school before you go to clinical rotations, or at least reflecting that while you were in basic sciences, you were doing well. That way they know you can handle the academia as well as the clinical rotations, but not a large emphasis is placed upon, if you got a B instead of an A in biochemistry in your first semester in basic sciences, they're not going to rule you out of residency.
And Rich, we have a lot of students here who've had struggles with step one and step two. Can you tell them a little bit about how RX Coach can help them on their journey?
Absolutely. So the thing with RX Coach is you'll get matched one-on-one with someone that has been working with students for a bit. I'm personally a coach myself, and you'll have someone that is able to guide you, to be able to formulate a study schedule with you, to look at your weaknesses and to really own in on these and try and make you the very best test taker that you can. The personnel one-on-one that you'll get from this, it'll be focused on your weaknesses. It'll be focused on what you particularly need as a student. And you'll get access to a practice pre-assessment that'll allow you to gauge where you're at and let your coach look at where you're at so that you guys can work together to form the best strategy for you going forward. And I personally can't undersell the importance of having that support and having that ability to have your studying organized and to just be able to focus on what do I have to do today? Okay, I can look at my schedule and know exactly what to do instead of figuring it out on the fly.
I want to make a comment here because I'm seeing a lot of questions that are pretty thematic, right? At the end of the day, we have a lot of students asking, will this help me get my residency? Will this or that hurt me from getting it? At the end of the day, remember, you need to pass step one, right? If you failed before, that's okay, just as long as you pass it. And then you have to do really well on step two, right? There's no shortcuts to that. And those are the two most important things. So passing step one, doing well on step two, right? So, there's students asking, oh, do I need to know this for the exam, or do I need to know that for the exam? And the answer is, you may not need to know it for the exam, but you probably need to know it for practice, right? And your goal should be to become a good physician. And I'll tell you, if you try shortcutting the materials now, it's going to be reflected in your step two score. So, I would advise you to set yourself up for success and not take those shortcuts, because those shortcuts can be detrimental to your future as a physician, right? I mean, once you take step one and you have a score, you can't retake it to get a higher score. So it's important to do well the first time around.
Absolutely, Sean. And just one last comment on that. Just like Sean said, if you shortcut your way now, it'll not only hurt you on the actual USMLE step two, but you will be at a severe disadvantage getting into your intern year, regardless of what specialty you match into, if you don't have a strong foundation, because there's no hand-holding or transition period between June 30th of your graduation year and July 1st, the day one of your residency. You're going to be on the floor, you're going to have patients, and you're going to be expected to manage those patients.
I think that's about it for now. Jeff, anything else that you're saying that you'd like Rich to address?
No, and let me just say we've gotten a ton of really interesting questions. Some of them are very specific, so we may not be able to get to all of these tonight. But what I want to do right now, why don't we go ahead and I want to just touch on a couple of things here while you guys are recalibrating. As Richard said, we do have our RX Coach program. You can go to rx-coach.com. We've got the link there in the chat, and you can set up that free consult to learn more about the program. Again, for us, we use a one-on-one approach. We set you up with RX certified tutors, and we also set you up with our RX 360 plus program. And the main thing, like Richard said, that 160 question assessment is really what allows us to gauge your talent, gauge your knowledge base, figure out where some of your strengths and weaknesses are, so that we can personalize that study plan around you. So if you are, if you're at that point where you think, I've got step one coming up, or I've got step two CK coming up, I know, I want to do my best, or maybe you've got CBSEs coming up. Regardless, we want to make sure that you're ready for it. Okay, so Again, we've got that link in the chat, rx-coach.com, where you can learn more. We do have different ways for you to follow us. Obviously, many of you already follow us on social, whether it's through Facebook or through Instagram or Twitter. You can also check us out on the blog. I'm going to show you something on the blog here, and I'll include a link for you here in just 1 second. But the YouTube channel is also where you can find all the recordings for our webinars, including tonight's session, as well as all of the Question Lab webinars that we hold, typically twice a month, where we help students learn how to dissect board-style questions. We usually choose a theme and run through about 4 questions, and we've got about 150 episodes there that you can check out on YouTube for free. So it's roughly 150 hours of great board style reinforcement. Okay. So make sure you're following us on all of those channels. We're also on TikTok as well. So we've got, we're putting out more videos and reels. In the chat box, I did include a link to the RX Study Planner. The RX Study Planner is it's a flexible tool. It's not only for, this says step 1, it also, we have a step 2 version. And in fact, this slide says 2021. It's a 2023 version of First Aid for the USMLE Step 1, as well as the most recent edition of Step 2 CK, First Aid for the USMLE Step 2 CK. So make sure you check that out. It's free. It's aligned with First Aid, and it really helps you balance out your studies based on, again, where you need to focus more of your attention. We do have a podcast. If you haven't listened to the RX Bricks podcast, it's a great way to study on the go. It's also perfect, for the summertime, especially if maybe you don't have classes, maybe you've got a little bit more time for, traveling or walking around. It's, all of our podcasts, about 10, 15, 20 minutes, taking you through one of our mini bricks. We've got about 850 bricks in our current library, and we've done somewhere, I think it's around 130, 140 podcasts. So again, a deep library to choose from. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Richard. As we draw to a close, I just want to take a moment to appreciate the journey that everyone here has embarked on. Becoming a doctor is a challenging path. And for IMGs, as we've talked about, there are some unique trials that you need to navigate. And your journey is really, it's a testament to your courage and your persistence and a passion for healing, right? There's the old quote from Hippocrates who said, hey, wherever the art of medicine is loved, there is also a love of humanity. And you have chosen to practice this art where you are, and maybe looking to practice in a different environment under different circumstances with, a pretty wide-ranging set of guidelines. And that just requires a strength of character, it requires resilience. That speaks volumes of your commitment. And the path here, it sometimes it'll seem winding, it'll seem obscure, it'll seem uphill. You've got I know language barriers, cultural differences, academic pressures, clinicals, right? And all of these hurdles, they're real, but they're also temporary. The caterpillar transforms into the butterfly, right? So each challenge you overcome is going to bring you one step closer to the doctor you aspire to be, in the place where you want to practice. So we want you to embrace those challenges. You're going to learn how to adapt. You're going to learn how to evolve. You're going to innovate, and your unique experiences and your perspectives are going to make medicine even richer. So just, remember why you're here. Remember why you started on this. Remember that passion that made you pursue medicine. the oath that you take to protect and serve lives, the smiles of the patients that you're going to heal, the smiles of relief from their loved ones. These are the lights that can guide you through some dark, long nights, right? And deck after after deck of Anki cards, right? Or questions. Um, and just this is also this is a testament here that you are not alone. There are hundreds of people here on this webinar, and the IMG community it's a robust one, it's a supportive one. Thousands have walked in your shoes, and many are going to be there, willing to help you on that. So as Richard talked about, when you are going through your residency training, lean on those that are around you, learn from them, because you're going to be the one who's going to be passing that knowledge on to those that come after you. So this is a challenging journey for you, but it's also building strength. And your diversity is your asset. So embrace this, let it fuel your passion and become the best doctor you can be, because we need you. This is it's not a race. It's something that's going to take time. So each day you need to wake up with courage, determination, humility, and you need to know and remember that the destination is going to be worth the sacrifice. So we just want to thank you for your commitment. We believe in you, the team here at RX and RX Coach. We believe in your dreams and your capacity to change lives. We know the road's not smooth, it's not predictable, but we're here to help you however we can. This is why our coaches are here. And we want to help you, continue on that path and stay focused and get better every day. So again, you can reach out to us if you feel like we could help you. Reach out at rx-coach.com, or just follow us on social. We're going to keep asking you questions every day. We're going to keep sharing videos. We're going to keep sharing resources that we hope will help you succeed. I do want to note we do have I mentioned Question Lab, and I'm going to put the link. So this is again, it's a workshop every 2 weeks. We've got 4th of July here next week. So the week after that, we'll have our next session. But we do this. We meet usually every other Tuesday, spend an hour answering questions. So if you want to sharpen your skills as a test taker, or if you want to learn a little bit more just about the methodology. Part of it is there's a lot about so much you need to learn and remember, but there are a lot of skills when it comes to performing well on board style exams, and we want we always want to help you where we can. Okay.